Greetings everyone. In this video, we're going to take a look at setting up your workstation for .NET development. Let's get started. All right, so let's get our machine set up for .NET development. And really we're talking about full stack .NET development. So with that, we're going to be looking at also possibly working with SQL Server and then also Azure Cloud Services as well, various offerings there. So with that said, we need to install a few tools, and we'll go through those briefly here in the next slide. SQL Server Express, SQL Server Management Studio, Visual Studio, and .NET 5. And we'll briefly talk about a suggested folder structure that's worked well for me in the past. And then lastly, we'll just go through an actual walkthrough of every single one of those installs really quickly. So first off, why do we want to do this, right? So, when we first set up our machine, that's kind of like one of the very first activities we do as a developer when we join an organization. So it's pretty important to kind of get that out of the way and get it done right the first time. Secondly too is a lot of organizations will have some kind of common or base set of tools that they want developers to use. And in this, the list that we're going to go through is pretty standard in that capacity. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about some additional items. So as we go through and implement various Azure functionality, we'll briefly talk on any changes you need to do to set up some of that additional software. So real quickly, and I'll have all these links in the description comments below, but first we're going to install SQL Server Express there. And secondly, we're going to install the SQL Server Management Studio so we can administer it. There's other tools, and you can use natively Visual Studio, but because we end up also working with remote SQL servers, it just makes sense to go ahead and put on SQL Server Management Studio. And then also .NET 5. Now, if you go through the Visual Studio installer, the newest one, it will pull those things down for you. But if you have already gone through a setup, we'll kind of walk through, where you can go get that .NET 5 and get that installed. Now, when you set up source code, when you pull it down from repositories, it's pretty common to have a centralized place. Now, the location that Microsoft has by default with your user folder is not necessarily that friendly to me, in my opinion, because you have to kind of jump through several places to get to it. So I tend to go ahead and create a root folder off of the C drive or any data drive you have called source or SRC. And then within there, I create two subfolders, one ADO for Azure DevOps and another one for GitHub. And if you have any other sources like maybe a Git-blit or repository you want to use, you may want to go and put that as that next level. Now within that ADO or GitHub, I actually put the actual organization name or the account name. And then subsequently within that would be each repo for that either organization or account. So this just happens to be a good way that I've used in the past to organize my repositories so that I can find them pretty easily just by navigating source. So let's take a quick walkthrough of this example here. So let me jump out to my slides. Now I have just a basic Windows machine right here. So the first item we wanted to go ahead and install was the SQL Server. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open Edge, and I'm going to paste in that link there. I'm going to go SQL Server. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just choose Express right here. And I'm going to download now. And we're just going to pretty much take the defaults to walk through that. So it's downloading right here. Let's go ahead and open that file now. And again, we're going to do our best just to make it super simple. I'm just going to take the basic install here, literally. Do the accept, take the default path, and click install. That's really the simplest piece of it, is just to make sure we get that going and installed in that very simplistic way. So now that we have SQL Server installed, we can go ahead and use this option here to install SQL Server Management Studio, but I'm going to go ahead and use the hyperlink that we have provided. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Internet the edge again, and go ahead and open the SQL Server Management Studio executable. And just like with SQL Server, we're going to take most all the defaults. And here we go. Okay, now that we have SQL Server and SQL Management Studio installed, let's go ahead and install Visual Studio. There's a couple ways to do this. If you've seen my video for Visual Studio subscription jumpstart, you'd go to my.visualstudio.com. And if you go here, you'll have the option to sign in and download your respective version of Visual Studio. The other way is to go to visualstudio.microsoft.com. And from here, you can install a wide variety of versions that they have available here. So I'm going to go ahead and just install the Professional. And it actually has some instructions here on what to do, but we're going to go ahead and open this up. And we'll go ahead and go through the installer here. Now with the installer, we're going to be able to pick what's called workloads and a variety of different workloads that are available. And we're going to set it up here so that we can just do some basic development. So first and foremost, we know we're going to do ASP.NET. We're going to do Azure eventually. And then also, it's also good to go ahead and do Azure data storage. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, about what that means for us, right? But if for any reason you want to install, you're welcome to install more of these workloads. And then later on, we'll talk a little bit about, as we go through, how you can confirm whether or not you have the individual components downloaded and installed, right? So just kind of showing these off right here. And you can search for various ones to make sure you have that installed. But realistically, these three workloads are going to be the most that we'll need. So ASP.NET, Azure, and the database, data storage. So we're going to go ahead and install while downloading and click install. And we'll let that get installed. All right, now that Visual Studio's in the installation is completed, we can install .NET 5 if we haven't already done so. So with .NET 5, you'll notice I didn't select that during the installation, but if I click Modify here and look on the individual components, you'll notice that .NET 5 is in fact installed. That actually wasn't in the list earlier when we saw this. So at any rate, if you don't have .NET 5 installed, you can open your browser and we can navigate out to the .NET download site, select .NET 5. And you want to install the SDK right here, depending on what your operating system version is. If you're installing it on a server-only situation, you can install one of the other options over here. But for our development workstation, I just installed the SDK. All right, so now that we got everything installed, let's go ahead and launch Internet Explorer. And let's go ahead and create our folder structure that we talked about, source. And within there, ADO, and GitHub. And within GitHub, I'll go ahead and, just as an example here, do the my Brad the Coder account. All right. So that's the folder structure there. Something else I wanted to just mention real quick too is if you ever want to go back to the Visual Studio installer to see what's installed, you can always do start run and just type in Visual Studio and there's the installer right there to take you to that. Another way to do that is, let's say you're in Visual Studio And as you know, the first time you launch it, it will take a minute. This is the important thing here. When it signs you in, if you sign in, this is going to go ahead and activate your account. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And at the same time, it's going to pull down any settings that you have in the cloud and go ahead and enable that in this instance of Visual Studio. And see right there, and it's going to go ahead and activate this for me. So this also indicates there's no need for a key. You don't need to enter product key at this point because it's going to use your particular subscription that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and continue without code. So you can go ahead and go to Get Tools and Features. This is going to go ahead and launch that same installer. And it's going to list the workloads that you have installed. So just another way to get to that same window. And you can also update it from here as well. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and sign up for notifications, and I'll see you in the next video.